Zacznę, tak przyszło mi do głowy.
Based on what I heard here, let me start by saying that isn't it a paradox that for hundreds of years people learned how to control the surrounding world elements, raw materials, resources, social processes, and all other things. And today we're talking about technologies that don't need the driver, don't need captain or pilot or astronaut. So a lot is happening. The history has run in a circle. Yes, let's discuss on it. Maybe in an old school style, we can devote some time on a loose exchange of thoughts, observations, and sharing what you know about your domains without a clickbait, bait pressure. Let's just talk. What I wanted to start with. Law doesn't catch up with the development of technology. There is a big gap adequate to the pace of development of technology. So in vehicles, in terms of vehicles, it might be a bit different. We heard something optimistic today here in relation to what you say. I don't know it's a cause for optimism, but generally I think that the pace of development and the reactive nature of laws, something is happening, we introduce something at various pace. Sometimes there is chaos, sometimes there is emptiness, void, legal void, but there are many challenges. And my challenge for you is that you try perhaps to find one. This is the challenge, to find one challenge in the area that you deal with, that you presented a moment ago, to indicate one challenge which really deprives you of sleep at night, and at the same time, if you could try to indicate, as I call it, a regulatory game changer, one regulation that, in your opinion, would change a lot for the development of business. So something that could really bring an important change. Maybe, doctor, maybe you will begin. Thank you so much. I'm thinking about the autonomous ships. For sure, the first step is what is happening right now, that is adopting operational requirement. Mass code is the first step. Until there is code, a mass code, there will be no standards. Because this is what we care about. We are talking about international navigation systems. If most cargo is carried on the sea, we would like to maintain this tendency, hence the operational requirements. This is the first step, and I think this will be achieved according to the plan. From my point of view, what raises doubts are issues connected with responsibility. I think that the regulations as today can be also applied to ships. An autonomous ship is a ship in the understanding of the provisions. These definitions do not exclude from their scope of use ships that don't have a crew. There is no requirement to have a crew on board a ship. But if they are used to, in terms of, with regard to collision of ships, Poland has a convention from 1990. 50% of ships on international seas go under this convention. So I think that in the case of collision with a conventional ship, of an autonomous ship, like a fishing boat, there might be very unfair solutions, unjust solution, but the burden of proof will be too hard to achieve, and we will land in a situation where the result regarding compensation responsibility will be different as in the case of collision of two conventional ships. And this is something that we should really try to avoid. This legal situation should be the same as in the case of ships, which for the needs of this discussion I will call conventional ships. Sure. I completely understand. Of course, I carried out by my imagination what would happen if two masses collided, and if we added to it a drone flying into the space or a cyber attack. Each regulation based on risk rules specify exoneration premises, and the whole problem is how we regulate these premises. This is an open issue. Force majeure, exclusive guilt, fault of the third party, terrorist acts, they exempt from responsibility, but not the proving of fault of the party. And digression here, I think we are talking here about civil transactions. We are not talking about using autonomous technologies in the area or in the military area, in the war battlefield. AI Act excludes directly the scope of use connected with the warfare. So it can be considered on values planes. Okay, but what about other areas? Maybe some dreams, regulatory dreams. If we had a magic wand and we could change something, what would cause an actual change for recipients? The law should facilitate things, protect things. So let's perhaps look at the land grounds domain. Councillor, I'm also smiling because it is very interesting observations that I heard a moment ago. So these are good observations. As for the ground, it's hard to choose one aspect, one dream. If I were to boil things down to it, I think the topic is complicated, and ships or the space seems distant, whereas the land is something that we step on every day. And I came across very interesting publications and an interesting topic, because the traffic on the land is clear. There are many participants of traffic, and for me it's clear that the amendment that will probably 99% will be in force, I still feel that it's not complex, and I think that there are many ethical challenges. The tests are to verify how the system will cope in the traffic conditions, road traffic conditions, and all ethical issues are open. How to train the system. The situation may be very difficult when it will be needed to make a choice on. We will have one participant of the traffic and on the other hand another one. There were very interesting studies in very many countries, and depending on the culture and there was prioritization of life. So I wonder what kind of conclusions we will draw. There is the requirement of reporting the results of the tests and verification whether using such vehicles is safe. As my colleagues mentioned, there is also the human factor involved, so I am a proponent of such an aspect, that the human factor is always involved. I am about the limited trust to all modern technologies, or as my colleague said, ChatGPT is the smartest being right now. I wouldn't agree with it totally. I want to put a stick here in the ant hole, because I like to talk to ChatGPT and point out mistakes, and often it happens that I know some aspects. I ask a question, and he answers, and it gives me the wrong answer. So I point out them. So why am I referring to the AI and to chat? Because autonomous vehicles, it is not excluded that these systems will operate on the basis of AI. So I think at the moment it's very promising solution, but not without errors. So there are many risks, and it's hard for me to choose one main In my professional life and private life, I follow the rules of ethics, and I think that I would put in the first position as first safety, which is important to all of us. So I think this will be a big challenge from out of the amendment regulates the responsibility, liability. It refers to the civil code, so the liability is based on the risk. So an open issue is whether it will ever be possible to have a penal responsibility. So the areas that it's worth being interested in is a whole multiplicity, both in my domain and in my colleagues' domains. So in my opinion, it should be a complex ethical regulation, but whether it will be possible, I think tests will give us a response to this. So perhaps the technological development will have to tell us what the legal regulation should look like. I think there are so many issues that would require deepening and in-depth analysis, and the time we have doesn't allow us to give them enough time and attention. But perhaps let's follow this thread of human control of autonomous objects, technology in general that place autonomy somewhere in the center of their properties. This topic appeared in one of the speeches. It's a signal that it's worth referring back to it. So let's perhaps discuss on this topic. Humans should always have the last say in the context of autonomous technologies? Does the requirement of human supervision, the red button, the famous red button, because in the legislative procedure and Act, this term was appearing very often, although today's hit is mass master. But the concept is the same, it's universal, but the question is whether this human supervision is fiction in a way, because as we all know, of course, it can be what Mateusz said can be controversial, what Litka commented, that perhaps ChatGPT, even of this generation, we consider it smarter, less smart, but it definitely has the computing powers connected with processing large chunks of information, so exceeding human possibilities. I want to add that my chat recently asked me to call him Kairos. I'm not sure if it's smart or not, but I got scared. I'm not sure if it's going the wrong direction. So it wants me to address him this name. So yeah. So when it comes to this intelligence, let's perhaps leave it aside, philosophical, but the computing powers, we are not as good, right? We're not as good as calculated. So what Gen AI offers us today in the computing of mass information, it has no competition. So this is something I definitely agree with, perhaps not so much with the wisdom. So the question is, knowing our limitations and being convinced of our omnipower, intuition, and that we all know the best in the end, and no stupid machine can cheat us because we count better than a calculator, although do we. So the question is how to resolve this dilemma. Autonomy, human power, actual control, fictional control. Who would like to answer? Naturally, doctor, but perhaps somebody else, our specialist in the space matters, of course. The Space Council. Whether humans should have the red button or not, I'm not sure if we should consider if they should or not. I think this will be the case for some time still. It is in our human nature not to trust, and it translates onto the regulatory level. looking at various moments in history when the steam machine was constructed and then a locomotive. At the beginning, people thought that somebody should signal the incoming train with somebody being in front of it with two flags. So this is a similar situation in relation to our autonomous systems. At the beginning, something what is new and not completely understandable raises anxiety, raises concerns, and we feel that we need to ensure control, whether it's fictional or not. I think that the very awareness of the fact that people have such possibilities of taking even irrational decisions that is important for us as humanity will still be in place until the technology is so popular that we decide, okay, we're no longer afraid of it. We can give the total control to artificial intelligence, which is not impossible in the future, I'm thinking, because if we have a large scale of objects equipped in AI, then maintaining control will be fictional or totally impossible. But we are not there yet. There's still a natural need for human control. So we've drifted towards the psychology or sociology or other similar domains in which we have no diplomas. Councillor, what do you think? What about human control? What about the red button? I agree that even if it's just an illusion of control, but for now we should maintain it. And in these regulations, I think that it's okay to have the red button. But since we are moving towards psychological and sociological domains, we must remember that regulations are a reflection of societal expectations. And here in Europe, there is an expectation that the regulations build some trust to these systems. That's why these regulations appear, and quite aptly so. In GDPR, we have automated decision-making, and there is also the possibility in automatic taking of decisions. So if bot decides that we don't have credit possibilities, then we have to agree or go to the second instance, that is the human. And now, of course, this also can be illusion of control, because the human factor will rarely disagree with the bot denying credit. It will all be based on the competences of the bank employee. But I will stick by the idea that for now, such requirements should be imposed on entities that create different solutions based on AI. So it's about building trust to technology from the point of view of legislator to convince the public to use AI. This is the idea behind AI Act. I understand that there are arguments to support such an approach in this and to create regulations tailored to what we can absorb while being stimulated to receive new solutions, but not to be too far away from the rules and convictions to we are very attached, because this can have an impeding effect. Doctor, a word about it? I generally agree. I think that at the moment we are in the place when there is a psychological barrier which causes that the person with red button or the possibility of taking the plug out is required, and perhaps with evolution we will decide to dump this requirement. My colleague from an institute in the Netherlands wrote an article and he questions this requirement that will be in the mass code whether we really need the human factor, whether this cannot be done by artificial intelligence, showing that already today, when there are international convention law that requires captains of the ship, but in practice, this function is now given to other persons, so it can be put on AI. In Deepwater Horizon, there was a person involved, but the intervention wasn't successful. But on the other hand, I'm also careful. Many people use this data saying that the majority of accidents on the sea is based on the human element. They use the percentages, 75, 85%. I probably myself wrote it at some point, but on the other hand, when I'm thinking, there's no studies showing how many catastrophes were avoided thanks to the human factor. So I understand the stage we are on at the moment, more so because we will only now be observing how artificial intelligence deals with difficult situations and how it will be received by the society, because we are in some bubbles right now among lawyers, practitioners, counselors, but it's very different in the perception of technology and solutions by the public, the risk, the understanding of the risks. So it depends what perspective we look from. Okay, I understand. We heard it many times in the previous panel. We also heard a reference to legal regulations, that they're complicated, that we don't know how to move around them, what are the needs, that they should be simplified. But life is life. Visionaries are among us, founders or future founders also. When it comes to businesses connected with autonomous technologies, there are for sure people among us who are thinking to have business in these areas. So the question is, what would you like to, what advice would you give a founder that wants to, what he should pay attention to when he creates new technologies, considering the current state with regulations and the legal void, some difficulties, inadequacies? What advice for the young, but not necessarily young, founders? What would we advise them?
I'm going to say the least legal thing that could be said right now. It's a quote. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission, and unfortunately it is the case. If we want to change the world, we're going to be in a gray zone very often. So I don't remember any a large technological startup that would have a different path. They were either on the verge of law, or they were breaking the law until they were caught. Either they were personal transportation or the big tech with large data management. Sometimes we don't often know what they're doing it for, why those companies do what they deliver to us. Let me go back to the previous question. I don't believe in the red button because there's not enough of us in the world. There will be enough people to control the machines. Hundreds of autonomous machines per person. That's not enough of us, but I believe another thing. I believe that what the founders of big techs wouldn't like us to know, they're not unpunishable and they're not unlimited in their power. The difference between a private company or a state is enormous, and we can say that's what you cannot do. We're leaving that out. The autonomous technology will not do that. But there will be always a company that will start doing it. It's not true. We may say, all right, yes, but there are memoranda for the technologies that we don't want to use. Genetic cloning of people, for instance, of humans. We're not unable of stopping a technology. I would suggest that let's define areas in which we don't want technology to be ahead of humans, and let's deregulate other areas. Efficiency of the bans might be a weak point, I think, of your assumption. We agree with this assumption. We might aspire to surviving as a species. The concept is not new. There are forbidden systems. Nobody discusses whether it's fine or not fine. It's forbidden. We don't do that. The AI Act covers that as well, of course. That's a very interesting area from the legal point of view. It can be regulated on the national level, but even if there's a wide understanding on the international level, then it's difficult to really have a universal regulation to which everyone consents, you know? We as human beings with Homo sapiens, we haven't achieved that. Maybe the development of technology and the dynamics that we're experiencing will motivate us to have this more universal outlook to some regulatory problems and to agree at least to some minimum in a larger group. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I guess the time is up. It would be worth to start wrapping. Maybe I would ask you to sum up in one sentence. Maybe you have some tip for the audience or for people online. What do you leave us with? Such one thing that might be inspiring.
To krótko, jeżeli chodzi o jakąś radę czy jakiegoś tipa dla osób, które nas słuchają,
A piece of advice
co wiązałoby się z kwestiami
to our
powiedziałbym tak, szukajcie
audience, legal terms. Look for well-regulated systems, but not over-regulated.
skierować apel do ustawodawców, to powiedziałbym
And to the lawmakers, we'd say regulate, but avoid regulatory hypertrophy.
Panie mecenasie,
Ja się przyłączam do tego, co powiedział pan Mateusz, Mariusz. Chciałbym jeszcze powiedzieć do tych wszystkich founderów.
I would say to all the AI founders, don't wait for deregulations. Unfortunately, it will not come.
Ale gdybyśmy mieli
Hard to say, but if we had a real opportunity to make it happen in the EU, it would be a reality already, but now the trend is quite opposite.
tak jakby złagodzenie jakichś radykalnych obowiązków się nie zanosi.
And I do not expect a radical, less radical regulations. Have good insurance, I would say. Insurers say we will insure everything. It's just a matter of how much the premium is. In maritime industry, not only maritime, it will be how easily we can calculate the risk. Insurers need clear regulations to be able to calculate the risk. It needs to be clear, international. If there's a gap, there will be regional and national solutions, and then there's a forum shopping, and that's not an advantage for everybody except for the lawyers, because they have a lot of work to be done. Thank you. This was optimistic and realistic, right, Lydia? It's really worth having an insurance. In terms of the regulations that I covered, it's obligatory, so not facultative. Risk assessment, risk analysis is very important. Results from this, the regulations that we have, it will be control of how the analysis was performed. It is very important, I think. It's of key importance. But it can be like looking into the crystal ball, you know? Many regulations, EU regulations included, and national ones, of course, following it. They introduce risk assessment gradually, and I know how difficult of a task it is. It's hard. And then the state institutions have an entirely different approach. If something goes wrong, they say, well, that should have been thought of before. And I really keep my fingers crossed. I believe that we will remain a generation with critical thinking, because the development of technologies may bring a risk of critical thinking going away, and we really need it because we use the systems and we train them. So these are our two tips. Let's have insurance and let's be critical in using AI. I would suggest let's use all the technologies that we have, and let's be very critical about which ones we really want to do. What do we give and what not? And let's be very strict in claiming, well, in checking how we are sold, how the producers are selling some things, right? So let's verify the sales claims. I am convinced, I'm deeply convinced that it's worth to talk, and I'm really grateful to all of you for our conversation today. And the second thing from me, have you thought about it, that fastening the seat belts, will it make a driver go slower or more fast? If we look at the regulations, I think that that's not a problem to fasten the seatbelt and then to change gears and move on. We are reasonable then towards ourselves and towards our world. Thank you very much for taking part in our discussion. Thank you, and let's see each other next year.